The morning I spotted my daughter sitting on a curb outside a Walmart in Tulsa, I almost didn't recognize her. She had her back to me, hunched over, wearing a gray hoodie I'd never seen before. A duffel bag sat next to her feet. My grandson Marcus, 6 years old, was leaning against her shoulder, clutching a juice box, staring at nothing. I had only stopped at that Walmart because I forgot to pick up my blood pressure medication. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't supposed to see any of it, but I did. I pulled into a parking spot and sat there for a full minute, hands on the wheel, telling myself it wasn't her. It couldn't be her. My daughter had a house 20 minutes from here, a good house. 3 bedrooms, a fenced backyard where Marcus liked to chase the dog. She had a husband who drove a nice truck. She had a job she loved, working as a billing coordinator for a pediatric clinic downtown. She was supposed to be fine. I got out of the car anyway. The moment she heard my footsteps and turned around, I saw it. The dark circles, the way her cheeks had hollowed out, the look in her eyes. Not sad exactly, but gone. Like someone had turned a dial down very, very low. "Mom," she said. Her voice cracked on the single word. I didn't ask questions right then. I just sat down on the curb next to her right there in the Walmart parking lot and put my arm around her shoulders. Marcus climbed into my lap immediately, the way he used to do when he was 3. I held them both and I didn't say a word for a long time. When I finally spoke, I only asked one thing. "How long?" She stared at the ground. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. My daughter and my 6-year-old grandson had been living out of a duffel bag for 3 weeks. And she hadn't called me once. I want to stop here for a moment because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking what I thought in the first few days after. Why didn't she call? I'm her mother. I live 40 minutes away. I have a spare bedroom. I have a fully stocked kitchen. I have never once in my 63 years on this earth turned my daughter away from anything. And I understand why that question feels obvious. Because it should have been obvious to her, too. But I'm going to ask you to hold that question for a little while, because the answer to it broke my heart in a way I wasn't prepared for. And it has everything to do with the man she married. His name was Trevor. They'd been together 7 years, married for 5. When my daughter first brought him home, I thought he was charming. Most people did. He had an easy smile and he remembered details. He'd ask about your knee surgery 6 months later. He'd bring your favorite wine without being told. My daughter, who has always been careful and a little guarded, seemed to relax around him in a way I hadn't seen before. I was happy for her. I told myself I was happy for her. But over time, slowly, so slowly, I kept dismissing it. Small things started to feel off. My daughter stopped calling as often. When she did call, she'd cut the conversation short if Trevor walked into the room. She started second-guessing things she used to say with confidence. Once, at Thanksgiving, she made a comment about how the clinic had given her a small raise, and Trevor laughed and said, "You'll spend it before the month's out," and everyone around the table laughed too, and my daughter just smiled and looked at her plate. I thought about that moment a lot, in the weeks that followed finding her on that curb. After I brought her and Marcus home that first day, it took almost 4 hours before she told me everything. She sat at my kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and she talked, and I listened, and I did not interrupt even when I wanted to scream. It started about 2 years into the marriage. Trevor began making comments about money. Small ones at first. He'd say she was a little loose with the credit card even when she hadn't bought anything. He'd mention an account balance that didn't match what she thought it was. When she'd push back and say she didn't remember spending that amount, he'd give her this look, patient, concerned, and say, "Sweetheart, we've been over this. You do this and you don't remember. I'm worried about you." She told me he said it so gently. That was the thing that made it so hard to fight. He never yelled. He never got cruel. He just expressed concern. Constant, steady, suffocating concern. Concern that she was forgetting things. Concern that she was forgetting things. Concern that she was stressed. concerned that maybe she needed to see someone about her memory. She started to believe him. That's what I need you to understand. She is a smart woman. She's been handling complex insurance billing for over a decade. She manages accounts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars for that clinic. She is not a naive person. But gaslighting doesn't care about your intelligence. It is patient, and it is surgical, and it works by making you doubt the one tool you use to defend yourself, which is your own perception of reality. By the time she was questioning whether she really had bought $400 worth of stuff online that she didn't remember, she was already so deep in it that she couldn't see the walls around her. Meanwhile, Trevor had been busy. He had opened 2 credit cards in her name. He'd done it gradually, using her information, which he had access to because they filed taxes together, because her documents were in their shared filing cabinet, because she trusted him. He ran those cards up to a combined balance of just under $34,000. Electronics, cash advances, payments to accounts she didn't recognize. When the bills came, they went to a P.O. box she didn't know existed. He had also been siphoning from her 401k. Small withdrawals at first, a few $100s here, a few hundred there, then larger ones. Over 3 years, he had quietly drained $61,000 from her retirement account. He'd forged her signature on the withdrawal requests using a form she had signed years earlier for a completely different purpose. He'd kept it, copied her signature, and used it over and over. And then there was the house. They had bought it together, but the down payment, $38,000, had come entirely from my daughter's savings. Money she'd been putting away since she was 24 years old. The house was in both their names. About 8 months before I found her in that parking lot, Trevor had refinanced the mortgage without her knowledge. He'd used a notary who later turned out to be a friend of his. My daughter's signature on the refinancing documents was not her signature. The new loan pulled $90,000 in equity out of that house. The money went to an LLC Trevor had set up under a name she'd never heard, RTK Holdings. When the bank eventually sent notices about the new loan structure, Trevor intercepted the mail. By the time my daughter realized something was catastrophically wrong, the account she thought they shared had less than $200 in it. The credit cards in her name were maxed. Her retirement account statement, which she finally pulled herself when Trevor was at work, showed a balance of $4,100. The house her down payment had built, had a mortgage on it that was $90,000 larger than it should have been. She confronted him. I asked her what he said when she laid it all out, and she looked at her tea for a long time before answering. He cried. He told her she was confused. He said she must be misreading the statements. He said he had been worried about her for a long time, and this proved it, that she was losing track of reality, and he was scared for Marcus. He said if she kept pushing this, kept spiraling, he was going to have to take steps to make sure their son was in a stable environment. He threatened to take Marcus. She was terrified. She believed him. Not about the money. By then, she knew the money was real. But about the threat. He had told her for years she was unstable. She was afraid that if she went to anyone, if she made noise, he would use all of that against her in a custody fight. She thought she had no proof, no money, no credibility. So she did nothing. She kept going to work. She kept pretending. Then, 6 weeks before I found her, he told her he'd negotiated a short sale on the house. He said they were underwater on the mortgage and this was the only way out. He handled all the paperwork. He told her where to sign and she signed because by then she had been so thoroughly conditioned to defer to him on financial matters that she didn't even read the documents carefully. The house sold in 2 weeks. Trevor took Marcus to his mother's house for the weekend. He didn't come back. He texted her on a Sunday evening to say he was filing for divorce and she should be out of the house by end of month because the new owners were taking possession. She had nowhere to go. She had no money. She had a son starting first grade in 3 weeks. And she did not call me because she was ashamed. Because she had spent 5 years being told in the softest possible voice that she was bad with money, that she forgot things, that she made poor decisions, and she had started to believe it was true. She thought if she called me, I would see it too. She thought I would look at her the way she had learned to look at herself. That is what he took from her. Not just the money. Not just the house. He took her belief that she deserved to be helped. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Now, I told you I was 63 years old. I also want to tell you what I did for 31 years before I retired. I was a forensic accountant. I spent 3 decades working fraud cases. Corporate embezzlement, insurance fraud, estate theft. I have testified as an expert witness in federal court. I have reviewed more fraudulent financial documents than most people will see in 10 lifetimes. Trevor had no idea who his mother-in-law was. The morning after my daughter told me everything, I sat down at my dining room table with a yellow legal pad and I started writing. She brought me everything she had: bank statements, the 401k paperwork, the mortgage documents from when they originally bought the house, her pay stubs, tax returns, every scrap of financial paper she'd been able to grab when she left. Within 2 hours, I had a clear picture. The fraudulent signatures on the 401k withdrawals were inconsistent. The pen pressure was different. The loop on her capital letters didn't match. The notary who had witnessed the refinancing documents had a license number that, when I looked it up, had been suspended 18 months earlier. The LLC, RTK Holdings, had been registered in Trevor's brother's name, but the registered address was a mailbox Trevor had used for other purposes. I called a former colleague of mine, a woman I'd worked alongside for 15 years who now ran her own forensic accounting firm. I also called a friend who was a family law attorney. That afternoon, the 3 of us were on a conference call for 90 minutes. By the end of the week, we had filed a police report documenting identity theft, fraud, and forgery. We had submitted a formal complaint to the state's Financial Crimes Unit. My colleague had prepared a 70-page document analysis showing the signature irregularities across 11 separate financial documents. The family law attorney had filed for an emergency protective order based on the financial abuse evidence, which in our state can be cited as a form of domestic abuse. Trevor's attorney, who I later learned Trevor couldn't actually afford, called my daughter's attorney on day 9 trying to negotiate. That call did not go the way Trevor hoped. What followed over the next 5 months was not fast or easy. I want to be honest about that. There were days my daughter sat at my kitchen table and couldn't get up. There were nights Marcus had bad dreams and came into her room at 2 a.m. There were moments when she felt so humiliated by the whole thing that she could barely speak. But we kept going. The short sale of the house was flagged. Because Trevor had forged her signature on the sale documents, the transaction was legally contested. The buyers, who turned out to be completely innocent, a young couple who had no idea, had to deal with title complications, and the sale was eventually unwound. The house title reverted to my daughter's name alone, with the fraudulent refinance mortgage stripped off after the court ruled it invalid due to the forged notarization. The 2 credit cards in her name were disputed with the issuers. With the police report and the documented evidence of identity theft, both accounts were cleared. Her credit score, which had dropped to 520, began to recover. The 401k administrator, presented with a signature analysis, froze the account and opened an internal investigation. It took 7 months, but $48,000 of the $61,000 that had been withdrawn was recovered. The remainder had been spent in ways that made recovery impossible, but $48,000 was more than we had dared hope for. The LLC, RTK Holdings, was investigated. $42,000 that had been funneled through it and not yet moved was seized. Trevor was arrested 14 weeks after I found my daughter on that curb. He was charged with identity theft, forgery, financial fraud, and wire fraud. His brother, who had lent his name to the LLC knowing its purpose, was charged as a co-conspirator. Trevor's attorney, the one he couldn't afford, withdrew from the case. He eventually took a plea deal. He was sentenced to 11 years. His brother received 4 years and a significant fine. The judge, during sentencing, specifically noted the deliberate psychological manipulation involved, the sustained gaslighting, the threat to use custody as leverage, and called it among the most calculated financial abuse cases she had seen in her courtroom. 11 years. I watched my daughter's face when the sentence was read. She didn't cry. She just exhaled, slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for a long time. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks after the sentencing. My daughter kept the house. She kept her name. She was awarded full custody of Marcus, with Trevor's visitation rights suspended pending his incarceration. The family law attorney had been brilliant. She'd built a case that framed the entire marriage as a pattern of coercive control, and the financial evidence we'd assembled made it airtight. I want to tell you where things stand now, because I know some of you need to hear the end of the story. My daughter went back to work. She'd taken 3 months of family medical leave. Her employer was understanding, and the clinic had a good HR department, and when she went back, her colleagues had covered for her without complaint. Her manager told her privately that she was one of the best people they had and her job had never been in question. Marcus is doing well. He had some separation anxiety at the start of the school year, which was expected. He sees a child therapist every 2 weeks. He has learned in the way children do that sometimes grown-ups go through very hard things and come out the other side. He is 7 now. He likes dinosaurs and building with Legos and sleeping with a stuffed elephant named Gerald. He calls me every Sunday evening to tell me about his week. My daughter is in therapy too. She goes every week, and she has told me more than once that the hardest work hasn't been the legal process or the financial recovery. It's been learning to trust her own mind again. Learning that the voice in her head that said she was confused, forgetful, bad with money, that voice was his voice, not hers. She called me on a Tuesday evening about 4 months after everything was resolved. Marcus was in bed. She said she had been going through some old files and she found a savings account statement from before she met Trevor, from when she was 27 years old. And she said it made her cry because she saw that 27-year-old version of herself had been so careful, so responsible, had been quietly building something solid. And for the first time, she said, she felt angry on behalf of that woman instead of ashamed. I told her that was exactly right. I told her that woman was still there. She didn't need to disappear. She just needed someone to find her. I almost didn't stop at that Walmart. My prescription could have waited 1 more day. I almost kept driving. I think about that a lot. If you are watching this and something in this story feels familiar, not the details but the feeling, the constant self-doubt, the missing money you can't account for, the partner who is always patiently explaining why your memory is wrong. Please hear me when I say this, you are not losing your mind. You are not bad with money, you are not the problem. And you do not have to wait until you are sitting on a curb with a duffel bag to ask for help. There are people who will believe you. There are people who can help you untangle what has been done. Financial abuse is real. It is documented. It leaves evidence even when it has been carefully hidden, and it can be found. My daughter found her way back. I have watched her do it, week by week, month by month. She is going to be okay. More than okay. She already is.